Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started, even though I know we still have attendees coming in. I want to make sure we use the hour to the fullest. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I'm Carol Fabrizio. I'm Chief Communications and Marketing Officer for USA Gymnastics. And this is going to be an hour of an athlete-driven conversation around mental health. Mental health is, as we all know, still carries some stigma, which can make it difficult for many of us to talk about. But we know that mental health challenges can and do affect everyone, even the most accomplished and decorated athletes. From burnout to anxiety, to eating disorders, to depression, and many, many things in between that, athletes face unique challenges in their mental health, while at the same time often having to perform and maybe even hide some of what they are struggling with. So today's conversation is largely intended to help reduce some of the stigma and encourage a more open dialogue around this important topic. We have three incredible panelist athletes who are here to help talk about this, and as well as our moderator, Karen Cogen, sports psychologist from the USOPC. So I'm gonna just ask if each panelist could introduce themselves for just a couple minutes, and then we'll turn it over to Karen to start the conversation. So let's start with Jessica. Jessica, if you wouldn't mind introducing.
Of course. Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Karen. My name is Jessica. I am the acrobatic gymnastics athlete representative. So I'm on the USA Gymnastics Athlete Council. I have been competing as an athlete for acrobatic athlete for 11 years. I've been on both the junior and the senior national team, as well as competed at multiple World Cups and the World Championships. One of the things that I will say that why I love to continue to work with mental health is because as an athlete, I became more aware of just even how mental health has affected me, as especially when you get into the higher levels, you start to realize it's not all physical, it's all mental. And so I wanted to continue that route even after I retired from my sport with acro. And so one of the things I wanted to continue with mental health is to help these athletes know that, one thing about mental health, we all go through it. It's something that at one point in our life that things will pop up, and it's like, how do we deal with that? How do we try to move forward from this particular situation? And so for me personally, I wanted to continue my education in that area. So I did receive my bachelor's in sports psychology at TCU here in Texas. And then I also am continuing to be a master's student and at TCU, as well as a graduate assistant. And so my emphasis is in sports psychology. And so I want to continue to work with athletes, to consult them, and to also help them to balance life and to also take these lessons and be able to help them as they move forward past their sport. And so this is one of the main reasons I wanted to continue with mental health, because I wish I learned more about it as an athlete. I wish I had the resources like some of these athletes have today, but that is okay. Now I can just take it and just go with it and just help whoever needs help in that area. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, but I'm so excited to be here and with all these amazing athletes.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. Sam, you want to go next?
Yeah, my name's Sam Mikulak. I do men's gymnastics, and I've been on the national team for 10 years. So I've been through the ringer for quite some time, and I've had a lot of different experiences, starting from 2012 Olympics through 2016, and then now through COVID going into the 2021 Olympics. And so every quadrennium, I feel like I go through a whole different mental shift, and definitely looking forward to just kind of sharing my experiences and how I think, I've come a long way in my growth through mental health and all the changes that I've gone through. So yeah, just excited to share and glad to be a part of this panel with all these amazing athletes as well.
Thanks, Sam. Steven?
Hi, guys. I'm Steven Gluckstein. I am not nearly as educated as Jess, but I competed in the sport of trampoline gymnastics, and I competed in the 2012 Olympic Games, and I was an alternate in the 2016 Olympic Games. Been on the national team for I think about 9 years, and I competed at 6 World Championships. After the 2016 Olympic Games, I retired as an athlete and took the position as the junior national team head coach. So I've been in that position since 2016, and I've been a personal coach at my club since I was 14 about years old. So like 16 or 17 years now, I've been a personal coach. And I'm excited to be here as well because my upbringing was very similar to the Soviet style. My coach had moved from Russia and shared kind of what she knew, and she, not her not being educated in this, you know, specific area, didn't really know how to teach it or if she should teach it. So I'm excited to kind of share my experiences that I've learned firsthand, and hopefully some people don't have to go through the same mistakes or steps that I did.
Thanks, Steven. And Karen?
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Karen Cogen, and I am a sports psychologist at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. I've been here for 11 years as a full-time sports psychologist, and then did some contract work with other sports prior to coming here. So I've been to 6 different Olympics now, 3 summer and 3 winter, and they're all different. And this one coming up is going to be different than anything else. So I'm really thrilled to be here with everyone on this panel to talk about mental health. As a psychologist, that's certainly been at the forefront of my career for a long time. And I've thought it's been an important topic, but I think it's just really more recently that we've begun to talk about it more and talk openly about it. And athletes really seem to be asking for this information. So I really appreciate all of you being here today and sharing your stories and getting this conversation started. You know, we have an hour and it's not a long time. There's so much we could go into. So we're really just going to skim the surface, I think, but, you know, please keep the conversations going, and let's just kick it off with some of the thoughts from our panelists. And I'm going to start with Sam. And Sam, I know we've spoken quite a bit about mental health and your thoughts on that. And Carol mentioned the stigmatization that athletes tend to face. You know, we're in a sport where mental toughness is seen as a virtue, and sometimes maybe you don't want to say that something's going wrong. But can you talk a little bit about that idea of the stigma around mental health and how we're trying to change some of that?
Yeah. So to start, I think I'll go back to when I first made national team. It was made available that we could all see a sports psychologist if we wanted. And at the time, you know, I would never have thought that, like, yeah, let me go see a sports psychologist. It was more so like, no, I've got everything figured out. Life is good. I'm happy. Like, I'm successful in my gymnastics. Like, there's nothing that I need to start focusing on. And really what I was doing for a lot of my, you know, what I've been doing honestly for my whole life was just holding in all the things that I always worried about and just pushing it, you know, deep down inside, or just getting it out of my head. And so I was continually just lying to myself, like, no, everything's fine, don't worry. Even though I'd have this stream of thoughts that would come into my head, and it would be what my conscious is telling me, like, hey, Sam, there's these fears, there's these worries. You need to tackle these fears and worries. And so for so long, I was not tackling them. I would just ignore them. And I never wanted to be seen as a gymnast that was weak or had issues. And that's what I always thought. People that got therapy, that was the reason you went, because you had some major issue, something huge. And I now see that it's more so a resource. You know, obviously, if you are in some deep mental struggles, it's a great resource. However, it's also just a great resource to use to make yourself better, even if you are in a mental or in a strong mental health state. And that was a big shift that I've had over the past couple years. And, you know, there are a lot of things that I packed down for a very long time, and I haven't grown ever since that moment that I first realized that I, you know, was holding all these things in. I felt like I just plateaued in my mental health, told myself I was fine for so long. And growth is what helps you feel comfortable, and always questioning and challenging the things that come to your mind that, you know, might be of concern. Actually confronting them and getting over them is what gives you the confidence when, you know, you're out on the competition stage with a lot of pressure, and you have to finally, you know, realize, why are you doing this? Is it for the right reasons? Is it for the wrong reasons? Is it selfish or is it selfless? And those were a lot of the things that were going on in my mind throughout most of my gym career that put so much more pressure on myself than I should. And because of that, I really wished, going into 2016 and 2012, that I had been working with a sports psychologist or a therapist so that I could get these fears out and tackle them head on rather than let them just build up inside and weigh me down once I did get out to the competition. Because everything that I was working for, I was working, physically, but I should have also been working on it mentally. And I think that's something that a lot of athletes might need to hear and might need to test out, because it's such a strong, push, physically, but if you're not actually taking as much time to work on your mental health as you are your physical health, you're not going to be successful in the end, because it's just going to bring you down when you want to use it most.
Yeah, the mind and body are really connected that way. And I think it really is more effective to face some of this and acknowledge it rather than kind of push it aside, which I think you're highlighting, Sam. So thank you for that opening. And, I'd like to move to Steven next. And you've mentioned a lot about the pressures around winning, and with winning sometimes comes failure. So overcoming failure, and sometimes there's a long-term impact of those sorts of things. Can you speak a little bit more about some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We're in a sport that we compete, right? So someone has to win and someone has to lose, right? And we're also in a sport where you pretty much have to fail at some point to move forwards, right? And I had a very successful career as a junior elite, which at the time was between the ages of 13 and 16, to the point where my last year of a junior elite, I won every single competition domestically and internationally the year before I moved into the senior elite division. So moving, to the right before the highest level there is, I have, all the success, no failures. And then as I, transition into competition, that year I started to realize more, failures. I guess if I don't know if that's even the right word to use, right? Mishaps, right? Obstacles. And I had known that failure in training is a good thing. It's something you learn from, right? You miss the, your feet, you put your feet 2 angles in front of you, or if you miss the high bar, right? If you do something physical and you make a mistake, you're like, okay, I got to analyze that and fix it, right? But like in competition, we don't analyze, right, the mistakes that we make mentally. Everything for me up until that point was all physical. So I kind of had an eye-opening experience, at the 2008 Olympic trials when, I was one of the, even though it was my first or second year as a senior elite, I was one of the top athletes to go to the Olympic trials, and it all came down to the last Olympic trial, and I fell on my second to last skill, which was the easiest skill in my routine, and looking back at that time, I was like, I think I stuck my hips back a little bit, and then looking back, it's like, what? No, I could do that 10 out of 10 times, if I was, mentally aware of how I was and what state I was in. But I kind of just ignored it, and I was just like, thought about it, it was a physical mistake. And then in 2012 at the Olympic Games, I made another mistake. And looking back in hindsight, it's like the amount of pressure that I put on myself, just to win or to medal, to be the first American to final, it was just an unhealthy amount. And at that time, I had not learned what to do with failure, and how to even expect it. I wasn't, because we're taught never to expect anything bad, right? And how I coped with, now that I've shared some of my, biggest failures, how I've coped with them. At first, I pushed it down and said, you can't be upset, you should be proud. And then looking back, it's like, no, be upset. That's okay to be upset. Being upset is good. That means I care. That means I tried, right? And once I started to kind of like allow myself to be upset, even years later, right? Even when I replayed that fall from the Olympic Games years later, I didn't tense up, right? My shoulders didn't go up. I didn't just want to like stop thinking about it right away. Now I can think about it. I can talk about it. I can share that experience, which years ago, I would just change the subject, right? So I think one of the other things that held me back was thinking I could change it, right? When I looked back, I wanted to change it so bad that that was one of the reasons why I held on to it as well. And so now, when I realized, okay, it's done, and I learned from it mentally, right? How to cope with these fears and failures and fear of failure. I can let go of now my newer failures today and not hold on to them for so long.
Steven, if you wouldn't mind me asking, do
Yeah.
you recall what was kind of going on in your head those moments before those failures?
I remember in London, and I think it was a couple of things, right? So number one, I was feeling so burnt out because we had Olympic test event in January, and then in March we had our first trial, second trial in April, third trial in June, and I had to win or be I had to place in the top 8 Olympic test event. I had to pretty much win the first and second one, and at the third one, I was first. I was in first place going into the final, and had I gotten second place at that final, I wouldn't go to the Olympic Games, right? So I was like in emotion, like so emotionally full. My glass was like over, pouring even before I got there. And I remember getting to London and that whole week, like not even being able to do my warm up, and just like realizing there, like I am so emotionally spent that I don't even know what to do.
Yeah, I can kind of piggy off that a little bit too, because there's 3 moments in my career where I've choked really hard. It was 2013 all around finals at our world championships. I was in like second or third place going into the last event, which is high bar, my best event. And the same thing happened in 2018 world championships, last event, high bar, medal potential. And then in 2016 Olympics floor finals, I was qualified in first, and I was last up on that event, and it was a very good chance for me to get the medal and to get all the what I thought, like these are my goals. This is what I've been working so hard to finally accomplish. And in that moment, it was like what I was thinking of wasn't really like, oh, I'm going to focus on the gymnastics. I'm going to stay in the moment. It was, oh my gosh, I'm so close to accomplishing my goals. Like I need to hit this routine so well so all my dreams can come true. And everything just in that moment just starts building up and racing, and your heart starts beating so fast. And then all of a sudden you blink your eye and you've made, all these mistakes, and you're like, I like don't even remember what happened. My mind blocked out. Like I was not in the moment. And I've made that mistake multiple times. And it took a long time of reflection to realize that, it's because I put so much pressure on myself to accomplish these goals. And then I never even like asked myself the question, like, why do I want to accomplish these goals? Like, what does that actually get me? How does that change me? Because I think at that time I put so much pressure on it because I thought all of a sudden it would give me all the fame in the world, all the money in the world, all the friends in the world. And all of that was built up into this moment of, if I can make this one routine as perfect as I can, I will get all this and more. And all of that all of a sudden just comes crashing down at you when you finally have your opportunity.
So there's a lot of commonality there. And Jessica, I don't know if you also have a similar experience, but I hoped you could talk about that as well as this idea of burnout, because Steven mentioned that, and how do you manage that as an athlete in this intense type of time in these sports?
Yes, of course. One of the things about athlete burnout is actually quite common, and we're beginning to see it more and more often. And we're like, how did this athlete get to burnout? Well, it could be for so many different reasons. It could be due to going to so many competitions, traveling a lot, not having the motivation. It's not fun anymore because it's always, it's the gym and home, and maybe school, and it's the same routine over and over. Mentally, there's a lot happening. And so one of the things is that for athletes, they're young kids. They're not fully developed yet mentally. As a matter of fact, your brain is not fully developed until you get to like 25, 26, 27. So you're asking children to also be able to practice this amount of hours a week, whether it's 25 to 30 hours a week, and then also go to school and do all this. And so it's just taking the time to be aware of this athlete burnout. It is common and it can happen to anybody. And so I have seen it happen, particularly within my sport. And one of the things is that I'm studying as of right now with my thesis, it's called the psychology of rest. And psychology of rest, if you think of it as mental rest, we put a lot of emphasis on physical rest, but what about mental rest? Mental rest is just important as physical rest for recovery purposes. So for instance, taking a nap or just even getting sleep, it's not sufficient enough to get that mental rest. How can you practice mental rest? By being psychologically detached from thinking about that certain activity, or in this case, sport or gymnastics. So one of the things that has helped me to become psychologically detached from sport, because if you think about it, you come home, and I don't know, Sam, Steven, if you have felt this, but even after practice, you go home, you eat with your family, or you're alone and you're no longer practicing, and then you're still thinking about that practice from that day. You're at home, you're like, oh, I could have done this better, or wow, why did I do this? Or actually, let's do this next time, So you start thinking, and so you're not taking a mental rest, you're still thinking about your sport. So how can we practice of not thinking about that, our sport? Well, one of the things is maybe watching some shows, going to go see your friends, taking a walk, just any activity that does not involve your sport. And I believe those are one of the ways of practicing mental rest or psychology of rest is really going to help prevent that athlete burnout, especially for athletes that are trying out for these national teams. Because if they're constantly thinking about the sport all the time, well, it's draining. It's mentally draining. And for me personally, I have done 30 hours a week. That was tiring. That felt like a job. But that's how I was able to, my partner and I, we were able to succeed at what we do. And so one of the things is that I definitely encourage athletes and any parent or coach watching that it's okay if these athletes take a break from the sports. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if you want them to last all the way up to the elite level one day, making that national team that goal one day. And so I'm just a master's student. I'm still researching about this, and that's part of my thesis, but it's something that I felt that is super important to share, that mental rest. And that is part of that key recovery experience for especially with athlete burnout.
I have a question for you, Jess. So what activities do you think would be healthy for some mental rest away from the gym, and what are unhealthy, activities, right? So watching so much television or being on your phone, or versus reading, or so are there any things that you think that would be unhealthy to stay away from?
Yes, I would say that I think there's nothing wrong with social media, but just like you can't have too much on the screen, and you're also still thinking, your brain is still in the process, like, okay, like it's still watching and like taking everything in. I could say that's one of the things that may not be the best to like do it all the time, if that makes sense. It's constantly being on the screen. You mentioned about reading. Reading is very good, particularly if to get your mind off of the ease of the screen time in particular. One of the things that I like to do is to continue to take walks with my family. We also talk about other things besides gymnastics, and that's like being with nature, being kind of getting out. You're still like in a way working out, but you're still recovering physically, but also mentally. So yeah, those are one of the things that I practiced as an athlete. And at the time, I didn't realize like that was, beneficial in that area. But you definitely touched upon some really good things right there. So I think that would be very helpful, particularly for the athlete.
Yeah.
Some things that I used to do because I had a really hard time getting outside of the gym and getting my brain to calm down. That even if I was exercising, going for a run or working out, like I was doing that to try to not think about it, and I was still thinking about it during those activities. So I had to find something else to completely subdue my thought process around it. And I found playing an instrument. So playing the piano, I used to play the piano and read music, and then I'm so concentrated on reading the music and playing that it wasn't even possible for me to try to think about trampoline. And the other thing was I used to have this little tiny drone that I would fly in my room for 5 minutes, and I would be so focused on not hitting anything and getting yelled at by my mom that I was so focused on this thing that I couldn't think about gymnastics. And after 5 minutes of flying this stupid little thing around my room, that I felt like an hour. Like I felt so much better afterwards. What about you, Sam? You have any things to take your mind off of training?
Yeah, well, so for a while, there was a time where I was like really hardcore into meditation, and that's generally a very positive thing. However, I somehow was able to manipulate meditation as a goal-oriented, relating back to gymnastics. Like the more I meditate, the better I'll be at gymnastics. And so I started doing it for the wrong reasons. And I think that was a part of where, I was just lacking in awareness. And so, after a while, I built up like, I've meditated for probably 2,000 plus hours going into 2016. Like I should be as zen as possible, but all it did was actually make things worse. And so, after that, I started playing video games. I started watching a lot of shows, and I started like getting like this little like whisper in my mind of feeling guilty for watching these shows and playing these games for so many hours and not feeling productive all the time. And, that was part of something that I needed to kind of confront. And it's because, and in the long story short was, I was trying to do all these things to, be like a role model that I thought everyone should have. And like, oh, I'm just trying to be the person everyone wants me to be. Like, this is the perfect role model. I'm going to live that perfect life. And after a while, I started, not knowing who I was. I like really skewed off from where I thought I should be. And, I just didn't know who I was at a certain point. I was just trying to be a perfect person. And I wasn't able to accept my faults. I wasn't able to be happy with my practices. And I let all my practices and let everything just affect me every day, but I still just ignored it for so long. And so it took a while for me to finally say, all right, Sam, like, who are you? Like, how do you even ask this question? How do you start defining yourself? And that was when I came up with, or I started, reading a lot more. And this guy, Jay Shetty, he's got an awesome book, and he changed a lot of my perspectives. But, there's this time where he's like, all right, you are not who you think people think you are. And that was like, I was like what? Like, that's blowing my mind right now. And at that point, he started, painting this picture of you are what your values are and how you act on your values. And so it was like, all right, I'm not my goals. I'm not my accomplishments. I'm actually like, what do I value in life? I seek happiness. I seek people that, want to help others, positivity. And so then I made a list of all the things that I like to do that, orchestrate those values. And then I asked myself, when was the last time I did any of these activities? And it was way longer than it should have been for things that I know deep down inside I love to do. I just haven't done it because I never, listened to myself long enough to actually comprehend that I wanted to go do these things. And so now, I go for bike rides. I go, I have picnics. I take baths. I have all these little resources and little tricks that I'm like, this is your time. Like, enjoy it. Do you. Don't let anyone else come into this space because you need to find yourself in these moments. And so having those types of resources, I've learned, have been very helpful. When I start feeling that overwhelming sense of, I need to provide, I need to make sure everyone's happy around me. It's like, no. Make sure you're happy first. And I've found some really, it's helped me so much in terms of just understanding myself, because that not knowing who you are is just a very uncomfortable place to be.
Sam, I appreciate that openness. I think a lot of people probably go through that, but it's hard to articulate, and you did that beautifully. And Stephen, I think we talked a little bit about that kind of thing. Do you have anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, so I kind of got to the same place, just via a different route. I had been just like you, doing trampoline, every single day since I can remember, and that's who I am, right? And so once I got to the Olympic Games and I had fallen at the Olympic Games, and I was kind of like, well, is one competition going to define me as like who I am as an athlete or even as a person? And then it kind of led me to this next thought where it's like, well, if one competition doesn't define me as a person, why should any competition define me as a person? And then that led me to my next thought. Okay, well, what does define me as a person? I did some searching, and one thing that helped me find out who I am as a person. What are my personality traits? What do I like to do? What do I, look for in others? Was making friends, right? And as maybe kids, they're surrounded by other kids in their school and their gym, so that's just something that naturally falls upon. But as you become an adult, you realize I should make some friends, right? And this process is a little bit different than when I was younger, and even in high school, I would try to reach out through friends of friends that I didn't know, right? So at least it's not just like I'm walking up to someone, because if you're a teenager, some stranger stranger teenager walked up to you, you'd be like, that's a little weird, right? So I always had like friends of friends that I would talk to, and a lot of times I wouldn't even tell them that I did trampoline gymnastics, and so this wouldn't even come up. So then it was kind of force me to find out, what do I like to talk about? When the other person's talking, what do I find enjoyable? What do I find boring? What makes me upset, when they say? And just going through this whole process, I kind of learned about myself, what I like to do, the people I like to be around, what makes me upset when other people say. And that helped me a lot get away from, I am Steven Gluckstein, Olympian trampolinist, to, who I am as a person.
Yeah, that kind of moves us toward this idea of transitioning out of sport. And Jess, maybe I can start with you, but you all talked about what that means, your identity as an athlete, and then moving away from sport, because we know there's an endpoint for everybody in athletics at some point. And we do need to look at what does that mean for us and how do we progress in our lives. And so Jessica, could you talk a little bit on that first?
Yes. One of the things I can share is definitely my experience. I had to retire due to things that were beyond my control. And so in acro, we have partnerships. And so if that partner no longer wants to continue or things is happening, then most likely the partnership is broken up and you try to find that other partner, or you want to just be done, that's perfectly fine. For me, I wanted to be done. I've been with my other partner for a very long time, and she and I, we connected so well. And so that's why for me, it's like, it doesn't make sense to start all over with someone else, especially we were at such a high level. One of the things I will say is that trying to find ways, it's like, okay, now what? After you're done, because you had a purpose to get up in the morning and to like go to practice, and then just have this schedule. Everything, it's like, it stopped for me. And so it's just like, okay, what do I do now? So one of the things that my parents have also encouraged me is like, well, get involved. And because you love acro, continue to get involved in your community. And it's like, okay, well, how do I continue to get involved? So for me, I decided to do more part-time coaching. One of the things later on, I started to judge. And then of course, get involved with the USA Gymnastics with the Athlete Council. So it's just finding things that works for you. And for me, I wanted to work more a little bit behind the scenes because I've been an athlete for such a long time. I wanted to give a little bit back to my community and help out as much as possible. And so for me, that worked out very well. Now, for some people, they may want to go into a different sport or if they want to maybe get into intramural clubs or something like that and still get active and still keep that exercise going. And that was a challenge for me. It's like, okay, you've done 30 hours. Now it's like, what do you do now? Like, and so I started to do yoga. I started to, YouTube is so helpful, Pilates and things like that. If it's hard by yourself, try to find a friend, and try to connect with them and do workouts in the morning. I have a roommate, she and I, we do yoga in the mornings. And so like just finding ways that works for you and your schedule. And what has helped me is also continuing to go through college as well. And so it's just finding a purpose, and it's like, oh, how can I be able to continue to be involved? And then there are some people that may not want to continue to be involved in their sport, and that's totally okay, whatever works for you. But yeah, those are mostly, for me, that's my experience. I know for everybody it's a little different, but that was something like, well, I want to still get involved. I still want to be part of this. So
Yeah, Sam or Steven, do you have thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, most definitely, because I announced my retirement this past summer, like in the midst of COVID, and it was honestly, it was time. I felt like it was, I've been in this sport for a very long time. I think I've always said I was going to keep going until 2024. And I think I just said that because I didn't know what my life outside of gymnastics would be. And for so long, it was like, all right, like, I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to have another try. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to have another try. And so once I finally said, like, I'm going to retire, like I'm ready to see what the next path is, then I was terrified of what that next path would be. And I started going really hard on trying to figure my life out, like before I actually retired. And that started consuming all this energy and all this, I was just so overwhelmed with trying to still be accomplished for this Olympics and, trying to juggle what I'm gonna do after the Olympics. And I was just, it took up so much. And it's really what kickstarted this whole self-reflection period that I've gone through. And it had me ask this question, and it's another quote from that Jay Shetty guy, but whatever you are not changing, you are choosing. And so as soon as I read that like a while ago, I was like, wow, like I have all these things that I know I want to change, but I'm not doing it. So therefore, like I am picking myself, or the path that I'm choosing is the path that I'm just not making any changes. And these changes I know will make me happy, like, figuring out who I am, what I actually love, and what I might be able to do after, rather than just being so consumed in the idea that I need to have everything figured out because that's what the perfect person would do. And I started embracing the moment a lot more and, realizing, right now, I don't want to worry about that. I'll let future Sam worry about that. But at the same time, I know future Sam, when he gets in that spot, he's also going to be mindful and he's going to be happy and he's going to be able to figure out what situation is going to be best for him. He's going to have a lot more time, a lot more resources for that moment. And, don't stress about the future. You can't control the future. You end up just worrying so much about the past, the future. All you really need to focus on is what you can do right now to be as happy as you can. And then once as long as you keep living in the moment, whenever that future comes and you're in that moment, it's still going to be the same way it should feel right now, which is happy and blissful.
I feel like I kind of got lucky in my situation. I think I have it much easier, than many other athletes, because since I was, like I said, I've been coaching since I was 14, and it's been a passion. I love coaching. I started coaching, little tiny athletes, 3 and 4 year olds, and worked my way up to the elite athletes. So that when I was in my third quad in 2016, I was thinking, do I want to retire? Do I not want to retire? And I had this thought that, okay, well, maybe I'll just train, 1 or 2 days a week and maybe do some competitions here and there. But my issue was that I didn't want to retire because I didn't enjoy the sport anymore. I wanted to retire because I wanted to use those hours to do other things that I hadn't gotten to do that I was passionate about, right? So I wanted to finish school. I got my degree from Rutgers Business School. I wanted to coach more. I wanted to travel, right? I wanted to make some money so that I could support myself. You know, and I knew those things were possible, but most likely not probable to do all if I was still training the way that I was training. So I was lucky enough that I was like, okay, after 2016, I'm just going to take a year off and we're going to see how things are going. If I miss it, I'll come back. I'm just kind of going to, you know, just chill, you know, in for a year. And this position for the junior national team coach came up, and I was like, it's a sign, right? I love coaching. This is my passion. I get to give back and be part of it and be part of the team and help the others, right? So I feel so blessed, you know, to have that bridge. Whereas there's a lot of athletes that don't have that bridge. And what upsets me is, because I've done the sport and been involved with the sport for so long, is that when people, you know, retire from the sport for negative reasons, you know, I just look back and say, didn't have to be that way. Maybe if they, you know, had done something sooner, you know, talk to a sports psych or even talk to some friends openly about how they were feeling about their teammates or their coach, or, you know, what they were thinking, that maybe they would be, you know, finishing their career still, but on a positive note, and happy about what they did, and not just with a bitter taste for the rest of their life, you know. Um, but you know, I'm still trying to figure that out for my athletes that are now going into college, you know, because it's like, well, I don't know whether it's selfish or selfless, still trying to figure that one out. It's like, I would love for you to continue doing the sport, but at the same time, I don't want to take away, you know, the fact that you want to go to college for 4 years and live there and find out who you are as a person through that outlet, you know. So I don't think there's any right answer. I think it's, you know, person to person, but I think the only way someone can get that answer is by talking through it. And that's what I try to, you know, do with my athletes, is talk to them about, you know, just opening the conversation about whether they, you know, want to go to college, how long do they want to do the sport, you know, do they enjoy it, what do they enjoy about it, what don't they. And I think that's just the first step, that a lot of athletes that are retiring now or 4 years ago never took.
Yeah, you know, you've all given such really insightful answers on this topic, and I think it does have a huge impact on mental health. And there aren't any right or wrong answers, but I think in the end, we hope that athletes don't leave their sport hating their sport. You know, we hope that somehow they've been able to figure out how to find that balance, and how to focus on the present, yet also have a plan in mind moving forward. And it's really a delicate balance there, I think. And I want to shift gears just a little bit here, because I don't want to run out of time to hit on a really important topic that Jessica and I talked about, which was social injustice. And we know that that has had an impact on the mental health of so many athletes. And Jess, can you just comment a little bit on some of your thoughts there?
Yes, social justice does affect mental health big time. And so one of the things is that people continue to not understand is that there are things that are happening in our country and around the world, and it does hit certain groups and certain people. And so you're asking for that athlete, that's on the back of their mind. It's like, well, that could have been me, you know, or that could have been, you know, somebody that I knew, whether it's things that are happening here in our country or outside of our country. One of the things is like, well, how can we continue to help out and with this athlete and not make them feel so stressed out? One of the things is talking. Just say, hey, how was your day? One of the things I notice is that people do ask that question, but it's like surface level, meaning that I think it's just a common nice thing to say, hey, how are you? But are we asking them, hey, how is everything? How you know, are you feeling okay? I saw that this happened and I just thought of you. You know, just little things like that goes a long way. That person may not share it, or that athlete may not share it right then and there, but at least they know, like, hey, that person cares, you know, and that wants to help. And so those are the little things that could definitely help. And something like for me personally, I have been touched by some of my acro community is that they do such a great job about talking to others when these things do happen. And so I know that for me as an athlete, I've seen the social justice, but like I didn't have like social media like these kids have today, where it's always in their face all the time. Because like you could see videos or comments and it's so it just hurts that person. It's like, okay, and then they're trying to tackle the hassle or the struggles of just throughout their day, and then this was added on. So more stress is added upon. And then they can't focus and do what they need to do to perform at their best. And so these are just one of the things of just being aware of it, asking how that person is doing, and that's how we can continue to help our community. And it could be with any particular group, whether it is race, religion, LGBTQ, all the way through people who are able versus people with disabilities. So, I mean, there's so many different things in age as well. So, I mean, there's things that I think we have to do a better job is not only being aware, but taking action as well. And actually taking that action is just asking, how is that person doing? It goes a long way. And so that's just one of the things I wanted to really talk about, because we're like, people are like, how do these two topics go hand in hand? They actually do, because that person can't perform to the best of their ability with all that in the back of their mind.
Yeah, I think that's critical. I just have for so long known that it's not just about the sport. It is about everything going on. It's the context. It's everything we face, life stress, sport stress, all of that has an impact on performance and mental health. They go hand in hand. And so I think that's really an important area to examine as well. I wanted to give some time for questions, and I know there have been some coming into the chat. Carol, I think you've been managing those, but I wanted to see if there are some that we want to address here for the panel.
Sure. One of the first questions we received was a really great question around what would it have looked like for you all as athletes to feel more comfortable? What could somebody have said to you to make you feel more comfortable seeking help and resources? So for the supporters of athletes out there, what could they do?
So wait, one more time. That's for like, if, me as a young person, how would I have been able to, be more susceptible to mental health and, therapy? Yeah.
The exact question was, how can someone help you be more vulnerable and create a safe space for you to be authentic and open?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, for me, I know a lot of my ideologies for, getting help and therapy came from my parents. And so, that's kind of where things, I never wanted to go to therapy because I don't think my parents ever wanted me to go to therapy, or, and, there's certain things like that with how you're raised. But, what I really probably needed was just a role model to come out and tell me, they're going to therapy and here's how it's benefiting them. And then having some type of relatability, that would have gone so far for me. I can't think of a single person that actually came out. Once Michael Phelps started to, I started thinking about it a little bit more, but I still wasn't fully aware because, some part of me was like, oh, I don't fully relate to him, but at the same time, I should have. And, it really depends on who you look up to as role models, because he wasn't my first choice in terms of role models. He is a great role model, but, someone in the gymnastics community would have been someone who would have been a much closer, sense of home of, hey, this guy is, trying to be the best in the world. He's going to see therapy so he can be the best in the world, not because he's fighting an illness. He's just really in tune with his mind, and he's using that to his advantage. And I think that would have been something I would have loved to hear when I was younger.
I think what I do now for my athletes is just literally building as much trust as I possibly can, and just checking in and doing it again from time, not just once and then, oh, they're okay, moving on. Because I know that for me personally, as I was growing up, someone would have to probably keep at it with me, because I was as stubborn as a mule, right? And even when people would say, hey, you should do some more stretching, right? they'd have to be on top of me more and more, because even though if I knew it was good for me, right, if it's something that maybe I didn't see as important, then I wouldn't do it. So I think for me, having that resource checked in like, every so often, whether it be have been my coach or even seeing an athlete, not just saying, oh, hey, this athlete or that athlete, goes to see a sports psych, and then boom, that's it. And then we forget about it. Right. But having it being shared, I guess, more often probably would have helped me a lot more because I did end up seeing sports psych, but not until it was like towards the end of my career.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Stephen and Sam. There's for me personally, the people that I would talk to is my parents, and that was that safe, open space for me to talk to them. For some people, it may not be parents, it may be a friend, it could be a teacher at school, or just whoever, and you just have to definitely find that person to talk to that you trust for sure, and that that person's not going to share this type of information to anyone else. And so continuing to find that person that you feel comfortable with as well. And so for me personally, just like you said, Sam, it was my parents. One of the things that I think coaches can continue to, of course, be there for their athlete, because athletes look up to their coaches so much, because they when they look at their coach, they're so used to like receiving different types of feedback, and if they see that their coach is happy, then for most athletes they're happy as well. They're like, okay, like this is all good. And so definitely, I believe that coaches have to continue to be aware of that, and know that there are athletes that will come to you, and that they may come to you with things that they want to share, and continue to have that openness and that approach to be ready for that. Because we're starting to see athletes are speaking up more and more, and they also look up to people around them, and one of their role models is their coaches. So I definitely applaud you, Stephen, for doing that and continuing to be there for your athletes as much as possible.
Yeah, one more thing on that. I think something that would have helped a lot too is just knowing how readily available, seeing a therapist or a sports psychologist could have been. Because also, I think of, at that time when I'm younger, like I think I don't have the ability to go see a therapist. I don't know how to start that process. And so having a resource like that, things have gotten a lot easier. You can go to Google and type in, telehealth, and like, or just type in like, I need therapy, and then a lot of resources come up, but then you also have to pay for it. And so there's a lot of different ways that I think, even we're in a great place now, but there's so many places we can still go in the future for mental health, and receiving therapy and destigmatizing it, and having some resources like that, I think would make such a great change for the future.
Thanks all. There was another great question in here about dealing with performance that is not what you hope for, and reminding yourself that you're a full person outside of your performance and your athletic abilities. How do you all deal with that, and kind of bringing yourself back to full personhood there?
Yeah, I can touch on that. So I know whenever, like, as of now, in a much healthier state of mind, I have to remind myself, I have to remind to love myself in those moments, and know that I could not be doing gymnastics at all. And the fact that I've had the opportunity to go do it, that means so much. Like, to be grateful for everything you have, the ability to go and perform, people supporting you through your journey, all the different resources that are out there. Those are things that, not many people get. And, life could be a lot harder than where you need to find that perspective of just having, all right, I didn't do as well as I wanted to. What can I learn from this to do better in the future? But also, and most importantly, what am I grateful for? And being able to answer those questions will help bring you back to the roots of what makes you you, and how you can find that happiness with the failure that you feel.
Wow, you definitely hit the nail on the head. Feeling, gratitude is something that I didn't start focusing on until I was older, but feeling grateful also helps you forgive, yourself for making those mistakes, and I think for me, another way that helped me was going and meeting with my friends, or, which is my support group, and not even discussing the competition, right? And just being and realizing that I have a life outside of this competition, whereas after the competition, you're still traveling with your team, you're still with everyone, you're still wearing your uniform, you're just, surrounded by that reminder of, of the mishap that you just, had. But then once, I got into my regular clothes at home, away from the gym and with my friends, didn't even talk about the sport. It kind of allowed me to move on a little bit faster.
Thank you both. One last question that I wanted to ask that came up a couple times is that you obviously have done a lot of physical training regimens in your life. What does your mental fitness training regimen look like? And kind of specifically, if there's anything outside of therapy, which may not be available to everybody, what do you do that might be helpful for folks?
I would say, oh.
All you.
No, I was just gonna say, like, for me, what has worked is that I can, because there are people that are not able to afford these therapies and to see a sports psychologist. And so one of the things that has helped me is continuing, of course, with meditation and prayer. So that has helped me to bring things back into a bigger perspective on life and on things. Just like Steven said, being with friends and your support group is always a good stress reliever for sure, because you talk about other things besides the sports, and also get to see life through your friends or through your family members as well. And so it just brings everything back into that bigger life perspective. Another thing is journaling. Journaling is also very helpful mentally, because what you do is write out about your day, and then you go and it's like a reflection almost. And that was something that I was able to practice as an athlete. I didn't do it every single day, but I do it whenever on days where I felt like it was great, or just days where it was like, yeah, okay. But it's good to look back on it and to see again that bigger perspective on life, and be able to take the mental health and realize that at the end of the day, you continue to love yourself and continuing to support the people that are around you as well, that your support group that is there for you just brings everything back into perspective. Because I think we get so focused on sport or work or just even, other things, that actually there's so much more to life to continue to be grateful for. And so those are just the little things that I think that has helped me for sure. So I definitely encourage anyone to try the journaling. Another thing is breathing exercises as well. Those are always really good. And it only takes a couple minutes out of your day to do it. So.
Yeah, you touched onto the meditation a little bit, and that's something that I used to meditate a lot just to clear my mind. But now I actually meditate to listen to my mind and then see where does that take me, and what is my mind telling me right now that I should focus on to help get over whatever, how can I get past this rather than just push it away. And so a lot of things that I've done, as you said, breathing techniques, 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds out, and just like calm the heart rate. And do that, once, and always try to be aware of your heart rate throughout your day. When do you notice that things start picking up? And all right, I'm conscious of it. Now let's take these breaths and let's settle down a little bit. And then it brings you back to the moment. And so another thing I started doing was trying not to multitask so much. Sometimes you're doing 4 different things. It's like, all right, let me just focus on one thing. Let's take it slowly. And let's try to, breathe through all these exercises, these chores, even like throughout the day, I'm doing like 12 different chores. I'm like, whoa. Let's just take a second, breathe. They're not going anywhere. Like, you're getting overwhelmed. Like, just be aware of what your heart is doing, what your breath is doing. And through that, you're going to be able to find a lot more inner peace through your day.
Yeah. So I can share a few things because my brother and my wife are still competing, and they're 27 and 28. And some of the things that I did was writing 3 things a day that I was grateful for, and that was it really helped me. And one other thing that I guess maybe you can do as a young athlete, but I think it works better as you get older, is calling an old friend, someone that you haven't talked to in like a long time. and that just kind of opens up, get you away from where you are, your issues right now or what's bothering you, and it kind of brings you back maybe a little nostalgia of another happier time. But my wife really loves to journal. She does it all the time. I've done it a little bit. I'd guess maybe I wasn't as disciplined as her. And my brother does. I'm sure you've maybe heard of it, the Wim Hof breathing technique. I think he's known as like the Iceman, right? That can submerge himself and basically he gets out of the pain, out of what's going on, and just in the present. Which I'm not so certain about what the technique is. I'm sure you can Google it, but he swears by it, and I think everyone has to kind of dabble in a little bit of everything to find out what works best for them.
Those are incredible examples of things folks can do. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know we're just past our time here. It seems this hour went incredibly fast. And I just want to thank you all for your incredible vulnerability and bravery and willingness to talk about this topic that doesn't get the airtime it deserves. You all mentioned that having somebody that you look up to or represent could have changed how you felt about mental health. And so you just did that for a whole ton of people. So thank you very, very much. And we will have this recorded and it will be posted on the USA Gym website so you can all see it and review it and hear all this wisdom again. So thank you all for participating.
Oh,
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.